As Miro said, run a small market access consultancy up in York and effectively talking about the challenges which to us appear rather like a game of snakes and ladders. You start off with the idea, you've got to get your evidence, you go round, you identify stakeholders, you start talking about paying, you go through all of these things, and there are certain things you can do which advance you, and of course you can go along the journey and something happens like a clinical trial fails or something else and you have to go back to the start again. So to us, it just seemed like snakes and ladders was a good thing to sort of indicate the sort of things that one has to go through purely to get reimbursement and a successful launch, which is obviously what you're trying to do when you get to box 36. This applies to all medtech, diagnostics, whatever, but it's specifically an issue with rare diseases, primarily because you're having to deal with a paucity of data and the heterogeneity of it. So, for the purpose of this, in terms of the biggest challenges, I'm not saying it's the only challenge, the regulatory side, absolutely critical, but it seems like even though there are processes to get faster approval, early access schemes in terms of the regulatory side, often the payers are a little bit more reticent. And we saw from, this was a couple of days ago, this was last week, these things are coming out all of the time, so all the hard work is going and it's falling on stony ground. So what's the problem? In effect, it's probably down to one of these three or a combination of them. And they are sequential. There's uncertainty, huge uncertainty about the evidence. Small patient numbers. It's not the same as if you're dealing with huge populations. And especially when you're looking at the counterfactual, because often it's, what is the alternative? It is its standard of care, and standard of care is not consistent. And especially if you're dealing with small numbers, you're having to perhaps amalgamate evidence from a number of countries. They'll all have different programs. So actually trying to find the right counterfactual, as it's called in the jargon, is very, very difficult. Then you've got to use that to try and get some idea of cost effectiveness, which is hugely difficult again because they're expecting something which is incredibly difficult to provide in terms of this is the treatment, this is what it'll provide, and this is the difference against what otherwise would have happened. And that has to be balanced within the quality threshold, the maximum willingness to pay by a payer. So if they're prepared to pay £20,000 for a quality, or 30,000 or 50 or 100,000 as a budget, all of these things have to be factored in. And it's often not just about the assets, the technology that you are developing, but it's actually getting that information about the other side, the counterfactual. When you've done that, you've got the affordability issue. I'm offering lifetime benefits, it's going to be great. This patient, has a situation where this treatment, maybe a gene therapy or something, is going to provide lifetime benefits. Fine, but it's a one-shot game and it's all up front. I think when Glibera was first being touted, it was going to be £1 million. No, it doesn't take many before you start to have a real budget impact on it. And that is in itself a huge issue, especially those who have dealt with NHS England. You'll be familiar with their concerns about financial years and such like. So, the solution, there's no magic bullet. There are, however, as Rick knows and everything else, various approaches being explored to improve that. EU NETA are working on this kind of stuff, but it's very challenging because you've got different cost base of different countries. You need to construct the economic evaluation early, get quality, health-related quality of life data from a validated instruments, often not the case. Use observational data, HES, to get information from other sources, and if necessary, use other ad hoc approaches. We've used state of preference, for example, to try and develop a utility from what was a clinical outcome. Early engagement with stakeholders, clinical experts are incredibly important in this field, probably more so than in normal disease areas, and they need to be selected with care. And patient organisations clearly had a huge amount of insight and valuable, and I think the work that Rick's doing in the team is exactly that, in trying to pull this together and make it more authoritative, I think is probably the best way to describe that. And the final slide, you'll be pleased to hear, is other things that have been going on, and most people have been aware of what's been going on with Duchenne UK and Hercules, nothing we've been related to, But the fact is, you've got competitive companies working together to provide that evidence. It's absolutely fabulous, and frankly, a model which needs to be repeated. Develop risk-share schemes and flexible placement, and a prediction for the future is that in the future it will be about outcomes and real-world evidence. In other words, you maybe only get a price, we'll give it to you now. In 5 years' time, if it's not delivered, it's cut. And to me, that's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you.